All right, as people start trickling in, hello and welcome back to the NNP Symposium 2021. My name is Matthew, and this hour I am joined by Ray Williams, retired electronic technician and collector of early American coinage and paper money. Ray, whenever you're ready, you're good to unmute yourself and to put on your video again. All right.
Okay, okay, I'm going. Okay, well, you now see me, I see myself. After hours in makeup and hair, this is as good as it gets. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit today about early American paper money, and I hope you all enjoy it. I'd like you, hopefully you have a cup of coffee and pretend that you're sitting next to me looking at some paper money and items and just having a good time. So relax. At the very end, I'm going to have my email address there. So if you have any questions that weren't answered or I couldn't answer, you can email me at any time, and I'll do my best to answer them. If contrary to popular belief, I do not know everything. Just ask my wife. But what I don't know, I will try to find out for you. And if there is an answer, I'll find it someplace. Okay, so let's go. Okay, if I could change the screen. Okay, I want to talk first about the literature on colonial paper money. There's a Freeburg book. The grading services both use Freeburg numbers when it comes to continental currency and the currency of the colonies. And they would have the initials of the state plus a number, or a CC for continental currency. And it's a good way to keep track of what you have and what the grading services are doing. The Bible of paper money collectors for early America is the Early Paper Money of America. The 5th edition is the last one printed, and from what I understand, there will be no future printings. There will not be a paper 6th edition. Eric Newman is the author, has done a lot of research. What he did is he purchased a collection intact from Harley Freeman, and with the collection was an inventory book, and that was the basis that Eric used to form this book, and he just built upon that for the foundation, and we have this opus. The book is available, even though it's no longer in print. You can get it on the secondary market. But you can go to the Newman Numismatic Portal, and here it is, and you can read the book for free. Now, being that there's not going to be a 6th edition, the Newman Portal has a living 6th edition online. And you can see it here. The advantage of the online is that they are not limited to one picture. If you go to, say, New Jersey, February 1776, in the paper book, there's only one image of a note. And here gives all the information about that issue. And you have a lot of notes that you can look at and compare and learn about. So keep in mind that all this is free on the Newman Portal. A book I just got in the mail about a week ago, Continental Currency and Coins, Whitman Publications, David Bauer's work. For $19, it's got to be one of the best buys in the market. So I highly recommend that also. So having a little bit of a library will help you out immensely. And these 3 books are all very good and important. Okay, we're going to talk about 2 major types of colonial paper money today, continental currency, and the bills issued by the colonies in the states. If you haven't done so already, if you have me filling up half of the right side of the screen and the slide presentation filling up the left half, click on the bar in the center and drag it to the right, and you can make the presentation almost full screen. You can't get rid of me completely. I'm going to be peeking out there on the right, but you can make the presentation almost full screen. Okay, from May 1775 until January 1779, the Continental Congress authorized the issue of 23 different denominations of paper money under 11 different legislation dates. I use this checklist right here. I keep a copy in my wallet in case of an emergency and I run across some paper money someplace. But this lists all the continental currency that was issued. If you go across the top, it lists all the different denominations. On the left side, all the issue dates. And you can see, like, for instance, $8 in November 1775, there were 83.6 thousand bills made. The number in the blocks issued means that that amount in thousands were legislated for that particular denomination and date. The green highlighted issues are the issues we're aware of where counterfeits were produced. On the far right, you have the total value of what the legislation had authorized in printing, and across the bottom, you see the total number of bills in thousands that were issued of that denomination. So it's a very quick way of looking at things, and if anybody would like an Excel spreadsheet copy of this, you can email me and I'll send you my spreadsheet. And you can just click off, put a line through or a check mark across the ones you have, so it's also an inventory list for you. We'll start off with the fractional bills. 1/6 of a dollar, 1/3 of a dollar, half a dollar, and 2/3 of a dollar. And this is February 17th, 1776, was a legislation. And you might wonder, you can see the use of a half a dollar, but why 1/6 of a dollar, 1/3 of a dollar, and 2/3 of a dollar? You have to keep in mind that we did not have a mint yet. So we were using Spanish mill dollars as a currency. So, but the Spanish mill dollars were in 8 reals. So it wouldn't make more sense to denominate the bills in eighths instead of sixths. But there is a reason for it, because an 8 real was worth 6 shillings in New England currency. So 1/6 of a dollar was a 1 shilling bill. 1/3 of a dollar was a 2 shilling bill. A half a dollar was a 3 shilling bill, and 2/3 of a dollar was a 4 shilling bill. And if you look at the vignette, you can see 1 dot here for a shilling, 2 dots for 2 shillings, 3 dots here for 3 shillings, and 4 dots here for 4 shillings. The vignette is something that was designed by Ben Franklin. Eric Newman, 25 years ago or so, wrote an article in the Numismatist, which pretty much proves that Ben Franklin gave the designs that are used on the fractional paper money and also on our Fugio cent that was another decade away. The vignette says Fugio, which means I fly, referring to time in the sundial, and mind your business. In other words, to look after things, not to stop you from being nosy. The reverse of all these bills has this linked 13, a chain of 13 links. Each one of the links has one of the states on it. In the center, American Congress, we are one. This was printed by Hall and Sellers, and Hall and Sellers is the firm that came about after Franklin left the business. Okay, this is a typical type of continental currency. It has a vignette, hand-signed. Every piece of paper money, continental currency or state currencies, colonial currencies, are all hand-signed. The signatures were not applied during the printing process. And usually one of the signers would also put in the serial number by hand. And it looks like Mr. Donnell had put in the serial number on this particular issue. As an anti-counterfeiting device, on the back here we see a nature print, something also developed by Ben Franklin. We'll talk more about that later. But I'm wondering if any of you out there know anything about Paul Cox or Nathaniel Donnell. I would think probably not. I don't. But in retirement, I plan to look up and try to do research on all the signers for all the colonial bills that I have. And other than their signatures being on these bills, their names would be lost to history. And these had to be important people at the time. I'm sure that the states and the Congress did not just pull drunks out of the public house, give them a quill pen, and have them sign these. These were men that were known and well respected in their communities. But we'll move on. Here we have an $8 bill with a harp on it. And this was legislated for November 2nd, 1776. And if you try to remember history, what was happening in November 1776, the British were moving across New Jersey from New York towards Philadelphia. And that culminated with George Washington crossing the Delaware River with his troops and capturing Trenton and the Hessians there, and which is a great story if you want to go online and look up the Battle of Trenton. But when the British were coming across New Jersey, the Congress in Philadelphia was getting scared. So what they did is they tucked tail and they ran to Baltimore. This particular bill, you can see down here, was authorized in Baltimore February 26th, 1777, while the Continental Congress got out of Philadelphia. But because of George Washington and our American troops turning around the British, the Continental Congress felt confident in coming back to Philadelphia. So the next issue is back in Philadelphia, May of 20th of 1777. And they had a number of different denominations you can see on that chart. Each denomination had a different vignette, all of them with Latin phrases and pertinent to the time. But Philadelphia was eventually taken over by the British, and as the British got close, they headed to Lancaster, Pennsylvania. After being in Lancaster, seeing that the British were in Philadelphia, after a day of being there, they felt they'd be a lot safer if they were across the Susquehanna, so they moved to York, Pennsylvania, across the river. And this bill was authorized in York, Pennsylvania on April 11th, 1778. When the British finally left Philadelphia, the Continental Congress did return, and they stayed there, excuse me, until the end of the war. Now, this particular vignette, 1778, has a globe in the center, Deus regnat exultet terra. That comes from, I think it's Psalm 97 in the Bible. The Lord reigns, let the earth rejoice. It's one of the religious quotes, biblical quotes that I've seen on colonial paper money, and also foreign money from England. I've seen a lot of that too. Anti-counterfeiting measures were taken, and they would use watermarks in the paper, colors other than black ink, secret marks, mica flakes, complex engraving, indenting. That would be where one side of the bill would be cut at an irregular angle so that there'd be a stub in a book, and when it was redeemed, it would be compared to that stub, and if it matched, you'd get your money. If it didn't match, then it was a counterfeit. Threatening death was kind of idle, but it occasionally happened. And Franklin's nature prints using leaves on the back, the veins in the leaf are like a fingerprint. and no two are the same. And it worked quite well, but there were still a lot of counterfeits. Some of the counterfeits were actually nicer done than the legitimate bills from the Continental Congress and the states. This is a counterfeit detector. It's identical and made from the same printing press as the real thing, but it's printed on blue paper, and it has no signatures and no serial number. And these were issued to large institutions that dealt with a lot of money so that they could compare notes that were tendered to the blue counterfeit detectors to make sure that they were identical and could be redeemed. And this is one method of finding counterfeits. You know, just thinking about it, Ivy Mills in Pennsylvania supplied all the paper for the Continental Congress and Hall and Sellers to do the printing. And I read in a book about Ivy Mills that they were given directions that the screen that puts the watermarks on the paper, if the British were approaching, they were directed to throw those screens into the water on the other side of the dam so that the British couldn't get a hold of it. So there were preparations in case the British did come to try to keep them from easily counterfeiting the money. The first bill issued in the Western world, from what I understand, was issued by Massachusetts in 1690 to pay for a military expedition. And this is an example of it. This is not in my collection. Actually, all the bills that I'm going to show you are in my collection with the exception of two, and just not in my price range. You can't afford everything. But this was the first attempt at paper money, and this was made from an engraved copper plate. There were basically two ways of printing paper money. You could use an engraved copper plate, or you could use raised type. The copper plates are also called intaglio printing, and the ink is placed in the crevices, then the surfaces are wiped smooth. The plate is pressed to the paper with a lot of force, and the ink is transferred to the paper. While with type and printing blocks, the design elements are raised, and the ink is on the top and applied again by pressing the paper to the type. But this is an example of intaglio printing. This is a 1709 bill from New York, and although most of the currencies were denominated in pounds, shillings, and pence, this particular bill is denominated in lion dollars. And to the right is an example of a Dutch lion dollar. And they did circulate in New York and all the way down to Maryland. And actually, they had to circulate in Massachusetts because there's a record of counterfeiting going on in Massachusetts, and you wouldn't counterfeit something that couldn't circulate. But I find it very interesting. A couple of friends of mine own these bills, but this is the second of the bills that I don't own and that I had to use copies of. Okay. Until January 1767, all the bills were denominated, or most of them, in pounds, shillings, and pence. Whoops, sorry about that. The very first bill to be denominated in dollars was issued by Maryland in 1767. And most of them are scarcer. A lot of them were turned in, but they circulated heavily, and to find a pretty 1767 bill is very, very difficult. So this is an example of that, denominated in $6, and you have the royal seal here on the left. You'll notice the seal of Maryland. Actually, I think until recently, this seal not only was on the Lord Baltimore shillings and sixpence, I believe it was on the Baltimore car license plates too. Virginia in 1775 denominated a bill in pistarenes. Now, pistarene, shown to the right there, is a Spanish 2 real coin that was minted in Spain, not in Spanish America. The pistarine circulated pretty heavily in Virginia, and there's a General Braddock who was on in the French and Indian War. He was George Washington's commanding general who died in combat, and his records were captured by the French and brought to France, and at a later date translated back to English because the original documents disappeared. But he had requested of England in those documents to send over pistarines and half pistarines. And that's probably why they're predominantly found in Virginia and the tobacco colonies. And it's a great topic. But on this bill, you can see here pistarine in the devices here. You have 1 shilling, 3 pence, 15 pence here, pistarine. And I don't know, I could count it out, but I don't want to waste the time here. Pistarine is also in the border devices here. It's quite fascinating. John Kleberg also did a study where trade routes could also have accounted for how many of the pistarines are found. Now, there's a big difference between a pistarine and a Spanish American 2 real coin. Compared to today's money, a Spanish American 2 real would be worth 25 cents. And if that were the case, then the pistarine would be worth 20 cents, a 20-cent piece, based on the silver content. But this is supposed to be about paper money. I will stop there and go on to the next. There are a number of ways to collect paper money. It's I got my start. I have a friend that dabbles in colonial coins, and he has a framed set of 13 bills, one from each of the colonies, hanging above his fireplace. And I saw that, and it looked so cool. I keep mine in the bank, but what he has above his fireplace was really interesting. So I looked into it, and it looked as though it was something that I could accomplish on my budget in a few years. And I eventually did complete it, but then kept going, adding on different bills. So thank you to my friend if he's watching and listening here. But you can collect paper money by colony, date, denomination, famous signers, famous printers, by the interesting vignettes, association with historical events, and however you can think of a way to collect them. For famous signers, here I have off of some of my bills, all the signers, as I said before, were very important people, but there are some more important than others. So Francis Hopkinson and John Hart were signers of the Declaration of Independence, very important. If we did not succeed in our revolution, all those guys would have been hung as traitors. Let's see, Hendrik Fisher and Joseph Borden, signatures 3 and 4, were members of the Stamp Act Congress. Joseph Borden, his father started Bordentown, and the place was named after him. Joseph Borden's house was burnt to the ground during the Revolutionary War by the British. Then you have David Brearley. David Brearley signed the Constitution. He was a representative. He was a representative of New Jersey to the Congress, and he was part of a committee responsible for getting equal representation for the states, regardless of their size. And if states didn't have equal representation, then pretty much at the time, Boston, New York, and Philadelphia would have run the whole country, and the other little states wouldn't have had any say. And then at the bottom, we have James Jarvis. He got the contract from the Congress to coin Fugio coppers in 1787. He's also part of the company for coining coppers, who were responsible for making the Connecticut coppers. And he was quite a character. I think he's gotten somewhat of a bad rap he deserves some looking into if you have any interest in the state coinages or Fujio coppers. But he's a famous person. I don't know how to get rid of that little section at the bottom there, but hopefully it won't interfere with the slides. They're famous printers. You have here James Parker of Woodbridge, New Jersey, printer to the king. Isaac Collins, he was set up in Burlington, and then later on he printed money in Trenton, just down the road from me. And you have Ben Franklin early on by himself, and then later on partnering with David Hall, Franklin and Hall. The three bills across the bottom were all made from copper plates printed by a famous person, Paul Revere. So you have the rising sun. The center is the codfish note, basically because the codfish at the top of it. And the one on the right is what we call the sword in hand. This one that I have was kind of economical because it was repaired at the time by being sewn back together. But the revolutionary there has a sword in one hand and a scroll in the other. And the scroll says Magna Carta. And a year later, they had enough of that, and they didn't want to get the rights anymore. They wanted independence. So instead of Magna Carta, the word independence was put in there. Those bills are very scarce. You could collect repaired and canceled bills. The one in the top left has been sewn back together, several sections, to keep it in circulation until it can be redeemed. The one in the center here has a pin that holds the two halves together, and that's called a pin note. While at a summer seminar at the ANA, taught by John Kralovich and Eric Goldstein, it was pointed out to me that those pins were handmade. And if you look at the pins very closely, the very top piece where the ball is, you could look with a magnifying glass and see a line where a piece of wire was wrapped around to give it the top. And they're the extent that people went through to keep these in circulation. It's quite fascinating. Here you have a bill that's been backed with a piece of paper to give it some rigidity. This bill, I got this from Spencer Peck. It's really cool. It should be the size of the bill to the right here. But what happened here is that this bill was split in half and had ragged edges. So at one point it was sewn back together. The ragged edges were trimmed off. There's a document here, a piece of paper from 1769 that was glued to the back of the bill to give it rigidity. Then it was trimmed to take off the ragged edges. And I don't know if you can see it in the picture, but in the center bottom, it was slice canceled to take it out of circulation and end its misery. But boy, these heavily circulated bills, they saw the use for which they were made. And they're a lot more economical. It's nice to have pretty uncirculated bills, but I'm just fine with ones that have seen use and met the purpose for which they were made. And then I have two examples of canceled bills. You saw the sliced one. This is circle canceled and edge canceled. Unfortunately, New Jersey, the state that I'm in, when they canceled bills, they did it by fire. So all the redeemed bills were burnt. So we don't really have any New Jersey canceled bills. Okay, I'm gonna share with you some bills that I think are cool. This is a palmetto bill, and I really wish I could get rid of this mute thing at the bottom. I don't know how, but the palmetto bill has a palm tree in the center. But if you look closely on the left and right, which I've blown up and magnified at the bottom here, on the left is Fort Sullivan, later named Fort Moultrie, firing on the British Navy, who were on the right, and you can see the flags and the masts here, and the British Navy is firing back at Fort Sullivan. This is the only battle of the Revolutionary War that's portrayed on paper money. And it's the Battle of Fort Sullivan, which was a great victory for the Revolutionary Army. and it prevented Charleston from being captured for about another 4 years. But they sent the British packing, and the British actually had to burn one of their ships to prevent the revolutionaries from capturing it. I think it was called the Action or something like that. But it's a fascinating bill. There is an example of this bill in both the museum at Fort Moultrie and also the Museum of the American Revolution in Philadelphia. This is a New Jersey bill, 6 pounds, March 1776, and we call this the Rittenhouse Bill. It has 3 colors. On the front of the bill, you have blue and red, and the back of the bill is all printed in black. So it's one of the few bills that can be seen with 3 colors. But why they call it the Rittenhouse Bill is over on the left, this edge ornamentation, this printing block, there's like a little basket here. Now, I've enlarged it and put it on its side down below. And if you look closely in the edge of the basket, you can see Rittenhouse spelled out, Rittenhouse. So this was, that almost sounded like a Walt, well, whatever. So we associate David Rittenhouse with having engraved the printing blocks for this issue. There's a similar issue in Pennsylvania that is so close, I kind of think that Rittenhouse probably had something to do with it, but no proof or documentation. Let's see. This is the lowest denomination bill that I've found. It's 1 penny, and if you note on the left here, it's 1/90th of a dollar, and this was the Bank of North America. And if you look on the back of the bill, it's printed by B.F. Bosch in Philadelphia. Now, the B.F. stands for Benjamin Franklin, and this is Ben Franklin's grandson, who had this printing operation in Philadelphia. Really cool piece, good history. All these have good history. There's so much research I want to do and accomplish during retirement. I can't wait. This is a $2,000 bill, and this is the highest denomination that was printed during colonial times. And $2,000 in Virginia at the time equated to 600 pounds, serial number 820. Now, this was cut out of the sheet nicely, but the bottom is torn. I don't know exactly. They either used a knife or scissors to cut these, or shears, but the cut in the bottom obviously was probably done by a knife, and it didn't rip apart nicely. But that's okay. It's still nice printing, strong printing, and a nice example of a high denomination bill. Virginia, we have Spanish $15 million, or their value in gold or silver, October 1777. Now, this is still early on in the war, and you have here a vignette of victory standing on top of King George III, and King George's crown is on the ground. He's holding a money bag with coins spilling out of it. And we all recognize this phrase, Latin phrase, sic semper tyrannis, from John Wilkes Booth as he jumped over the railing and broke his leg. So, but kind of, it took a lot of guts to print something like this when the war really wasn't going that good. And actually, it looked like the war was in doubt at the time. But this had the 1707 printed on it, and then hand printed in was the date and the year. Okay, how are we doing time-wise? 3:34. Okay, this is a New Jersey bill from February 1776. In order to make this bill legitimate, the treasurer from either East Jersey or West Jersey had to sign the bottom. He was Sam Tucker. You'll see at the top that there were only 2 signatures, missing the third. To make a long story short, the British Army came in December 1776 to Trenton. The state treasury was being hidden at a farm of John Abbott, and Mary Pointing, a barmaid in a tavern in Trenton, overheard John Abbott and Sam Tucker talking about storing the treasury at his farm, and she was a loyalist, told the British. Lieutenant Colonel Abercrombie, I think was his name, issued an order for an officer and 20 troops to march to John Abbott's farm on December 9th, 1776, and they captured the state treasury and the state papers. Now, they only captured half the treasury, the ones with only 2 signatures. And this is an example. All the 2 signature bills were in the hands of the British. So the British Army had in their possession this bill that I now own at one time. And I could imagine today at the Abbott's house, there is a document hanging on the wall, a loyalty agreement of John Abbott to the king, signed on December 9th, 1776. And I would imagine if there were a bayonet in your side, you'd probably sign just about anything. I'd like to think that John Abbott was a patriot who was forced to sign that document. Cool bill. I'm very happy to own it. Okay, we have a good example here of the leaf design on the back of these New Jersey bills. And to duplicate the leaf design and all the intricacies would have been very difficult for engravers to do. They tried, and really unsuccessfully. If you compare the counterfeit to the real thing, it's pretty obvious. But these were, the bill on the left was printed by James Parker in Woodbridge, New Jersey. The one on the right was printed by James Parker in Woodbridge, New Jersey. He's got one too many O's in the name of the town. And I like to show this to kids and let them know that even adults make big boo-boos. Glad to have these. Let's see. Oh, this is a $1 bill of the Continental Congress. Continental Congress, if you looked at my chart earlier, had issued 5 different issues, dated issues of $1 bill. And I was able to manage to get an example from each of the 5 dates. There's been a lot of talk and publication recently about the Continental dollars being tokens or medals of a type struck in Europe and sold in England for 6 pennies a piece. And there's an existing advertisement for that. And you'll get debates back and forth. I have I have no personal involvement in that particular argument. But what I do know for certain that this is a real Continental dollar issued by the authority of the Continental Congress, and I have one. So I've got a real Continental dollar. You can see the blue thread in the paper as an anti-counterfeiting device. If I held this up to the light, you would see a watermark in there. And it's just, look at the designs and how nicely the printing blocks were made. Just thrilled to have. This looks like it's a pot boiling on a fire, but it's not. It's actually a pot weighted on top of a plant. And something about if it's squashed, it will come back again, and making references. All these have political or economic references or uplifting references to the time. Okay, these bills look kind of nasty, don't they? Well, the bills of Delaware, 1759 and 1760, were printed on paper that wasn't the best of quality. I have a feeling from their scarcity that most were redeemed. And these are examples. I went after these 3 specific bills, which I'll get to you in a moment. But these are the best I could do. And believe it or not, of the 6 bills I've been able to trace of the 30 shilling, this is the second best of the 6. But if you look here at the 10 shilling bill, you can see the SH up in the left, I'm sorry, in the right corner there, SH in the right corner. In the center bill, you can see very faintly there are 3 leaves for the anti-counterfeiting device. In the third bill, you can see a retrograde, a backwards D in pounds. Now going to the next block, this is why I went after those 3 particular bills. Residing at the Library Company of Philadelphia are these printing blocks. They're the only ones known to exist from Ben Franklin. Those bills were printed by Franklin and Sellers, or I'm sorry, Franklin and Hall. And I wanted to get an example of each one of those bills that goes with these printing blocks. So on the left, you can see the 3 leaves of the printing block design. To the right of that, you can see that the lead top is mounted on a wooden base. I don't know, I guess that's approximately an inch high, or I'm sorry, half-inch high. On the bottom are the 2 printing blocks for the edge devices. You can see the SH that were at the top of the far left bill we saw. And here you can see the backwards D in pounds for the bill that was on the far right. I was able to go visit the Library Company of Philadelphia. That was established in 1727 by Ben Franklin and been adding to ever since. There's so much there numismatic that I just have a feeling I'm going to spend a lot of days there in retirement doing some research. It's a fabulous place. But those are the printing blocks. I'm very happy I was able to get a chance to see them. Here are 2 sheets of bills. These are very common sheets, or at least the one on the left is. You can see them on eBay all the time. So they printed them with 3 denominations on a sheet for these issues right here. When they were done printing them, they would get 50 sheets at a time, put a hole through the top, and run a wire through it to keep them in blocks of 50 sheets. There must have been some type of discovery of a bunch of these, because there are thousands of these sheets out there. I know that the A&S has a complete bundle of 50 in their collection, and there were many bundles of 50. And I'm glad to have it. It's a nice example of what the printing was like. What you get now, these are so common. Some people ask a lot of money for them, but say if these were worth about $500 each, there are some numismatic criminals that will actually cut these up and have 3 separate notes that they'll get slabbed as uncirculated and sell them for $200-300 a piece. So they're kind of destroying what I consider history in order to make a few dollars there. But these are examples of what sheets look like. Some sheets are very rare, but these North Carolina 1771 sheets are common. The one with the duck on the top is a lot harder to get. Okay, I want to thank these people right here, A&A Archives of the Numismatist, Len Augsburger, Stu Hainbuth, Dave Gladfelter, Eric Goldstein, James Green, the Library Company of Philadelphia, John Kralovich, Jessica Linker, Roger Saboni, Leanna Spurrier, the Eric Newman Educational Society, and the Portal, and Matthew for being my narrator. Now, I have here a time period that we're going to have questions, but before I stop sharing, I want to give you an opportunity to write down my email address. If there are questions you have that I have not answered or don't have time to answer after Matthew takes me off of here, feel free to email me. If you don't have anything to write with, Len Augsburger and the Newman Portal has permission to give my email address out to anybody that asks for it. And and I just have fun sharing part of my collection. Man, I kind of wish I had a whole afternoon. John Kralovich and Eric Goldstein spent an entire week talking about colonial paper. And yeah, when the summer seminars get back online again, after we have COVID under control, I hope to take some more of their courses out there if they're teaching again. Okay, I guess at this point I'm going to stop share. Okay.
All right. Welcome. Thank you once again for the amazing presentation. Could really tell that there's a lot of passion in your collecting, and very unique getting to really catch a glimpse of like this time period just through the currency. So once again, any participants, you all can use the Q&A feature to submit questions, and it looks like we have about 14 minutes. So let's go ahead and try to get into some, at least right now we have at least a couple of posts, not questions, but at least wanting to say, great, fantastic presentation as always. Thanks for taking the time to put it together. Excellent talk. Just have a lot of admiration. All right, here's a good.
I'm fine with admiration. There's worse things than that.
Absolutely. All right, let's see. What was the public reaction and reception to continental currency and the early American paper money issued by colonies/states at the time? Did people prefer actual coins over paper, and how was that handled back then?
Okay, that's a question we could talk about for the next 15 minutes or however long I have. People, of course, preferred hard currency. They wanted the gold, silver, and the copper coins for making small change. The paper currency, though, did enable commerce to go on to a great extent in faith. A lot of the paper money was not backed by actual money, but by land, and especially after the Revolutionary War, property confiscated from the loyalists. So people would prefer to have the hard currency. The paper money would circulate to a certain extent. When the further you got away from the issuing authority, the less value it would have. Like, I doubt that anybody down in South Carolina is going to want to have much to do with the paper money coming out of New York or Connecticut. But if they're in South Carolina, they would probably be okay with bills that were printed by the authority of Georgia, because their commerce would be better. As far as the continental currency goes, you've all heard the phrase "not worth a continental." When the currency was first printed in 1775, it was accepted pretty much at face value, for a short period of time. But as the war progressed, it became worth proportionally less and less and less. And I think that the final continental currency bills in the 1790s were redeemed for like $1 on 100. So if the Continental Army came to your farm and commandeered a horse and gave you the $50 continental currency to pay for that horse, in the 1790s, you would have gotten 50 cents. But that was the price of our freedom. Consider it a tax, or funding the military. That's what we had to do. If we didn't have the paper money, we would not have won the revolution, I don't believe. And I don't know if that answered everything, but let's see if there's another question.
Absolutely. Okay, here's one. So by the 1780s, Hall and Sellers were not only printing continental currency and Pennsylvania currency, but also the paper money of several other states. How did they receive these contracts, and were other printers displaced by the revolution?
Okay, Hall and Sellers did print for other colonies. In addition to the Continental Congress, they also did Pennsylvania money too. It's always puzzled me why Ivy Mills got what appears to be an exclusive contract to supply their paper, when the Rittenhouse family of Rittenhouse today had a paper mill there. I don't know where their paper was going. But as far as the business aspect of it, I don't believe that any printer was displaced, because there was plenty of printing going on, either newspapers, books, flyers. And as far as the paper money goes, if you look at the back of almost all the bills, you'll see that from colonial times into federal times, the printers are the same. So I don't think that had much of an effect on other printers. But that must have been a massive operation. If you look at the chart that I showed you earlier in Excel, and you add up the number of bills, I don't know how many million, probably 500 million bills on a screw press, printing press at the time. I can't imagine how big their operation was and how many presses that they had working.
Absolutely. And so with sort of those big operations, is there like a rough estimate on sort of like how much it would cost to like really start like making that kind of money in those days, and then sort of paying for these things? Did they pay in the hard currency, or like with the bills being made, how did that sort of like providing the funding when you're like printing the funds like how did that sort of?
Sure. Yeah, Hall and Sellers and all the printers were money-making businesses. They had to be paid, and I believe most of them were paid with the money that they were printing.
Wow, that's a very interesting position to be in. I feel like very few.
Well, you would think that there'd be an opportunity there to print some extra money that nobody knew about, but there were controls. And I know for the state of New Jersey, there were controls on how many sheets were printed, and then the sheets had to be divided between East and West Jersey and signed by the signers, and then the signers would switch and the other signers would sign, and then the treasurer would get all the sheets of bills with 2 signatures, and then he would only be allowed to sign a certain number of these, 1,000 British pounds at a time, to take care of state business. And they kept control over them. And also when the printing was done, the state of New Jersey took back the printing blocks and plates. So yeah, you would think that there's opportunity there to make some money on the side, but probably not.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm sure it was pretty well regulated, as it probably had to be. Following that, about how popular would you say like early American paper money is, like among collectors in general? How much to people like outside the U.S., and providing some examples of like rarity or prices that like might be new?
Okay, well, I think in the colonial community, coins are the most popular, which is good because it makes the paper money a little more affordable. And by multiples, it's the paper money at the moment is an area that's somewhat economical. Some of my bills I've purchased for as little as $30 or $40 a piece. Some that I went after that are rare, like that Rittenhouse bill, the 6-pound bill, that I don't know, it's like $800. But for the most part, you're not going to be spending tens of thousands of dollars on a single item. There are some that are that rare. There's a $20 marbled edge printed on paper brought from France by Ben Franklin, and that can get up into 5 figures.
So price, that's nice. How much in percentage would you sort of guesstimate, like of these sort of like issues like survived, and how much of the notes survived? So how much of like the printing do you think we currently would have access to today?
Okay, well, it varies. Like I showed those well-worn Delaware bills. There are very few of them out there, and they're hard to find. But there are others that, for instance, Rhode Island bills are very common. The March 1776 New Jersey bills are very common, while the February 1776 bills are very hard to come by. So it depends on the issue and the colony as to how many survived. So I can't really tell you across the board, but they didn't have much value in the 1800s. I actually purchased one bill on eBay that somebody found in his mother's estate that was used as a bookmark for a first aid book from the 1800s. When I wanted, I said, how much would you want for the book you found it in? And he gave it to me for free. And I saw the stain of where the bill was inside the book as a bookmark, and kind of, so, you know, to use a colonial bill as a random bookmark. But in 1865, Henry Phillips wrote the first kind of in-depth work on colonial paper money, and people started to become aware of it. And there were some collectors, but I don't think it's been as popular as colonial coins, and which is okay for my wallet.
Absolutely. So we have about 4 minutes to begin to wrap this up.
Before you do the next question, at 4 o'clock, there's an interview with Ken Brissett, and he is one of my numismatic mentors and heroes, and I plan to be on as soon as Matthew lets me go.
Absolutely. In any case, though, I guess one more question. What sort of initially got you started into all this? Just sort of like pinning back, like when did you start collecting, and what sort of like sparked that interest?
Okay, well, collecting the paper money,
yes.
There was an article in the Numismatist about 25 years ago by Eric Newman about the fractional continental currency with the design, the Fujio design, mind your business, the sundial, and the linked chain. And I found that fascinating. And I got one piece of paper money then, but it was really seeing my friend's framed set of 13 colonial bills, one from each colony, that I looked at that and I said, I got to do that. And then, but you can't just buy 13. In the process of doing that, you see something else that's cool, something else that's cool. Hey, this was captured by the British Army. David Rittenhouse is involved here. I've heard of Francis Hopkinson, and before you know it, you have a lot of bills.
There you go. Just one at a time. Well, thank you once again, Ray, for the amazing presentation. We're about to wrap things up here. Any last like parting words to the audience?
Oh, this is a hobby. Have fun. If it's stressful or it makes you upset or something, you need to find another hobby. But I'm having a blast, and I really appreciate the Newman Portal for allowing me to share some of my fun with you guys and gals out there. And if you do have any questions, please use that email address, and let's all see what Ken Brissett has to say.
Absolutely. Well, thank you once again. Thank you all for tuning in to this presentation by Ray, and we'll go ahead and sign off. We'll catch you all at the next presentation.
Okay. Thanks, Matthew.